Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Today I want to talk about anti-Semitism. Before we dive into that, a quick reminder to hit subscribe and tell your friends about us if you enjoy the show, and I'm hoping you are. All right, boy, anti-Semitism, it's been around for such a long time, but seems as though it's been on the rise ever since the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel a couple of years ago here. Joining us to discuss this is Richard Marceau. He's the Vice President, External Affairs and General Counsel with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Their website is cija.ca. Good to have you with us, Richard.
Thank you, Paul, for having me.
You bet. Now, is it just me, or has hatred of Jews actually increased since the events of October 7th? Are there stats, that would show that there, in fact, has been an increase at all?
There's stats everywhere, Paul, that shows this. I can talk about Statistics Canada that shows that Jews, even though we're 1% of Canada's population, we're the target of 70% of religiously motivated hate crimes in Canada. We could talk about the police statistics from Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver that show that explosion of anti-Semitism hate crimes. And here, when we talk about police, we're just talking about hate crimes. That does not necessarily include hate incidents that might not rise to the level of criminality, but it's still anti-Semitism. So are we seeing this? Yes, we're seeing it in unions, we're seeing it on campus, we're seeing it in schools, we're seeing it in politics, we're seeing it in our streets where violent slogans are being chanted very, very regularly. We're seeing it to the point that, for example, the Jewish community in Montreal went to the courts to get injunctions to protect their institutions, schools, community centers, synagogues, so that they would be protected. And let's remember, and now 34 of those institutions are protected by that injunction, even though injunctions tend to be a very, very extraordinary measure in Canadian law. So that's a situation we're in now.
Yeah, I think it's without a doubt that the levels of hatred for Jews has just simply increased since, again, 2023, October 7th. I remember the 1-year anniversary of that. I think it was in Vancouver, at the court building there, and we had these protests, burning Canadian flags, shouting death to Jews, death to Israel, death to America, death to Canada. I'm going like, okay.
Right. It's hatred of Jews, but it's also hatred of the values that are our common values of democracy, of respect, of tolerance, of small L liberalism, so acceptance of difference, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. We are seeing an assault by illiberal forces, illiberal movements, people who are masking themselves in our streets. If you're demonstrating for something, and I'm all for freedom of expression, well, what would you need to mask yourselves and be kind of a 2024, 2025 version of the Ku Klux Klan? Yeah. Like if you're standing for something, show your face. I'm here, Paul, doing this interview. I'm not behind a mask. If I'm in the street demonstrating, I'm fully, my face is fully visible, and it shows that they know that what they're doing is problematic, and the problems that we're letting do them.
Yeah, I get concerned when I see these kinds of demonstrations, that kind of hate being spread around, and it's simply because somebody is Jewish. Now we can disagree with Israel and some of their policies. That's okay. I'm not saying Israel is 100% right in the way they do things in the Middle East, but you know what? Because somebody happens to be of Jewish descent, how does that give anyone in Canada a right to, speak badly about them, to harass them, to call them names, to invoke violence? These kinds of things is simply not acceptable in Canada, and it shouldn't be acceptable anywhere for that. I mean, we've had Jewish schools being shot at, synagogues, being burned, or firebombed, that sort of thing. We have Jewish businesses and neighborhoods being targeted, right? So
absolutely.
So this sort of thing. Go ahead.
So all those examples did and are happening. Did happen are happening, and it's serious. When my partner's kids go to a Jewish school, and there were people a few months ago who were yelling "Death to the Jews" in front of that school. So imagine her feelings about letting her kids go to school.
Yep.
Jewish synagogues. When you go to services like I do every Saturday morning, there are rings of protection simply to go to synagogue where you want to pray. Is that normal in 2025 Canada? We have Jewish businesses, and you mentioned that are being picketed, and why is that? And if I compare with any other situation where people may disagree with the government of a foreign country, I don't remember a Russian church or Russian restaurant being picketed and vandalized because of what Russia is doing in Ukraine, or a Chinese restaurant or a Chinese community center being attacked or having demonstrations in front because of what's happening to the Uyghurs, or an American business being picketed to protest what Donald Trump is doing, and I can go on and on and on. So to attack or demonstrate in front of those Jewish institutions would have nothing to do with the state of Israel. They're not, it's not those are not Israeli institutions. This is textbooks anti-Semitism, like we saw yesterday with the Holocaust monument in Ottawa, which was vandalized.
Yep.
Because to supposedly protest about what's happening in Gaza, and this is completely unacceptable.
It certainly is. Again, this is Canada. This is not some foreign nation where there's no democracy and so forth. We pride ourselves on being free and just as a nation. But I think we are dropping the ball to some degree here. Let me throw this out to you here. Now, the leaders of Canada, the UK, and France recently put out a joint statement, and they're basically threatening concrete actions against Israel if it doesn't stop their renewed military offensive in Gaza and lift the aid restrictions. So. I get it. It's we're in a global community, and we don't always agree on different political moves and actions and that sort of thing. But Canada used to be fairly closely aligned with Israel, and there's good reasons for that. Because at least from my perspective, when I look at the global map and I look at the Middle East, where's the only true democracy? It's Israel. They're surrounded by nations that, they have elections, but reality is we know those are not free elections. So very different systems, very different values in some of the countries that surround Israel. And there's such a hatred that, some of the nations are actually committed to annihilate Israel. So how do we then, as a Canadian democracy, how should we be responding to these situations? Any thoughts on that?
Many thoughts, Paul. The first thing is that this is a completely unnecessary war. There was a ceasefire that was broken on October 7, 2023, where Hamas and some Gazan civilians, so let's remember that, came across, broke the border, killed, raped, burned alive, shot people at a music festival, and killed 1,200 people. And that is why there's a war here. It was led by Hamas. It was started by Hamas. Hamas is the same group which, by the way, keeps saying, given another chance, we will again do another October 7th. So Israel has no choice but to make sure that Hamas is uprooted and doesn't control Gaza, because otherwise, and they've said it, and when they say something, they mean it, as we saw on October 7th. So this cannot happen again, because obviously the first responsibility of any state, being Canada, the US, France, Britain, or Israel, is to protect its citizen. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's still hostages in Gaza,
yes.
and those need to be freed. So I want the war to stop. I want the suffering to stop on the Israel side, on the Palestinian side. I have enough of the bloodshed. This cannot stop until the hostages are released, until the Hamas lays down its arms and is kicked out of governance. So as in Canada, the UK, and France, if they put the responsibility on Israel instead of where the real responsibility of the situation lies, they're contributing more to the problem than to the solution.
Yeah, I guess when I think it through here again, I understand why Israel is wanting to renew the war, if you will, not for the sake of, hey, let's kill more Palestinians, but against Hamas itself, because reality is, if you allow Hamas to rebuild, they've flat out said, yes, they'll do it again. That's their goal, is to annihilate Israel, to end their existence. So I understand the methods to try to get rid of this terrorist group completely so they can actually live in peace. And I'm not sure if we get that in our Western mindset because, unless you live in that kind of situation, you haven't experienced it, it's hard for us to kind of imagine what that's like, year in, year out. Now,
correct. And Paul, like, Canadians are fundamentally good people.
I think so.
And it's hard for many of us to understand that they are actually truly evil people there. Out there, people who do not want peace, do not want coexistence, do not want respect, do not want freedom, and Hamas is one of those. And it's hard for Canadians sitting in Alberta or Ontario, Quebec, or wherever to really realize the depravity of those people who would kill children, who would even risk the lives and put the lives of their fellow citizens, Palestinian citizens, because for them, on the lines, because for them, the more civilian deaths there are, the bigger the outcry. And unfortunately, Western leaders, including Western media, by the way, are playing Hamas's game. The latest example of this is, we see, oh my God, Israel has attacked a hospital. That was just 5 days ago. And then you realize that actually they did not attack a hospital, the European hospital in Gaza. It was right beside it, and they targeted tunnels in which Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of the mastermind between October 7th, was. So we have proof on camera that they were hiding under a hospital, literally under a hospital. Israel pinpointed the attack. The hospital is still standing, and yet in media they say, "Oh, Israel attacked a hospital," without mentioning, "Oh, by the way, there were all those Hamas people under the hospital." And in international law, if an infrastructure like hospital or school is used for military reasons, it makes those infrastructures, those buildings, legal to attack, and Israel has attacked. So in this case, Israel, I think, has gone way above what Canadians or Americans would do to protect civilians in a very dense urban area that is used by Hamas as a shield, either the people of Gaza or either the civilian infrastructure.
Yeah, we need to do a better job in our Western media, I think, on covering these things. I remember there was a situation where there was a rocket that blew up, just outside of a hospital, and some, people were killed, civilians and so forth. And of course, Israel was accused of firing rockets at the hospital. I mean, that's not normally something that Israel does. And of course, it turned out the evidence came out from multiple countries, when they got the footage and so forth, the recordings, that it was actually Hamas, a terrorist rocket that blew up, Right. So,
but Paul, to use this example, I think Western media and governments should have learned that, Hamas lies.
Yeah, they do, clearly.
But for some reason, and I think it's willful blindness, Western media and leaders fall into that trap. I think sometimes now voluntary. The latest example being not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, is Israel would have shot 31 people at a food distribution center, and actually it did not happen. So, but the lie went across the world. and that was running everywhere. And then the BBC or the Washington Post just said, well, actually, that's not what happened. But many media did not correct their first news. And it adds, right, that blood libel creates let's say, the atmosphere to rising anti-Semitism. And we have people here that are willing to kill Jews in Canada or the US, or to attack us here in North America or in the Western world in order to make us pay for what's happening there. And it's very problematic.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the big things right now, there is concern, and I can understand the concern because, I mean, if it's true that Israel is actually, not letting enough food and aid into Gaza for regular civilians, and if they're starving and not getting medical attention as part of the war effort, that would, I believe, technically be illegal and, of course, morally, not right. So, does that need to change? Any thoughts on that particular tactic, if that's in fact what's happening?
So civilians should have access to aid. The issue that we've had in the past, and UNRWA is a good example of that, is that oftentimes the aid was hijacked by Hamas. The intertwining, if the word is correct, between UNRWA and Hamas is very problematic, and Hamas has been known to actually take over some of the aid and then keep the aid for its fighters instead of using to civilians, and selling it, in fact, to civilians instead of giving it to civilians. So the issue is not the what, meaning having aid to civilians. The issue is the how. And the old system that gave access to all that food to Hamas did not work. And now there's one that is put into place that is much better, that is not under control of Hamas, and that I think would help the food to go to where it should be going.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. It is. You have so many different players in here. And of course, the terrorists, using whatever they can to their own advantage. Well, let me ask you this, I guess. There must be a reason that more and more civilians in the Gaza area are now protesting against Hamas.
Because they're realizing that it brought them nothing but destruction, bloodshed, and death. But that is all that Hamas is interested in. Hamas is not interested in creating a Palestinian state living side by side with Israel. Hamas is not interested in peace unless it's the peace of a cemetery, meaning Jews being dead. Hamas wants all of that territory, wants Jews dead. They've shown it in the past. Again, they don't only say it, but they proved it. And Palestinians and Gazans are saying, you know what? More and more Gazans are saying, that's not what we signed up for. This is not what we want. We do not want this war. We do not want this suffering. We do not want all those deaths. Unfortunately, Hamas wants that. And they're saying, no, enough. More and more are saying enough. And those people are incredibly brave, because as soon as there's a dissent, and we've seen images coming out of Gaza more and more, as soon as somebody is voicing their disagreement with Hamas, the chances are that the time that is left for them to live is seriously
I hope more and more of the world and more of the Palestinians as well realize that their real enemy, I don't think, is Israel so much. I think it's actually Hamas, and that intense hatred and violence for other human beings, in particular Jewish people. That's causing the problem.
It's Hezbollah, it's the Houthis in Yemen now. Just an hour ago, we're shooting again ballistic missiles on Israel, and behind that is Iran, which is kind of masterminding all of this.
There's a lot of evil players, if you will, in that Middle East area there. And again, certainly not saying that all the people in those areas are evil. Of course not. There's, I'm sure, wonderful people in Gaza there who long for peace and don't want to see any more killing at all. But there's some who are absolutely intent on wiping out the Jewish nation simply because they're Jewish. Now, here in Canada, again, how do we get a message of peace on side here? Because it seems to be okay with many leaders in media, in business, in our academia systems here where it's okay to have hatred for Jews. I mean, some of the comments I've heard, coming out since October 7th have been absolutely crazy. People kind of celebrating what happened. And so what's happening here? Why is our education system, somewhat anti-Semitic, at least to some degree? And I know one possibility is even that some of our universities apparently get some foreign funding coming from nations like Qatar. Any thoughts on that?
So I've not seen the amount of money going from Qatar to Canada. I know there's studies done about Qatari money in the U.S. What I can tell you, Paul, is that you're right to point out that the problems on campus is huge. Jewish students are bullied, are harassed, are
teachers
excluded,
as well.
And you've seen the problematic encampments that was strife with anti-Semitism, the number of Jewish students that have reached out to us asking for help, their parents as well. We're seeing that double, triple, if not quadruple standard against Israel, trying to boycott Israel. We've seen that in the arts sector, always blaming Israel, which again I will remind people did not start the war that started on October 7th by Hamas. We've seen this in schools, K to 12. We've seen this in unions, where, for example, Fred Hahn, the president of QP Ontario and the vice president of QP National, have celebrated resistance on October the 8th, knowing that there were hundreds of people who had been killed and tortured and raped, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem is very deep. I would go, Paul, to go as far as saying that the promise of Canada has been broken, where people were told, come here, you'll be safe, you'll be able to have a place to raise your kids, to build the life that you want. But now Jews are feeling more and more under siege because we are under siege in our institutions, our synagogues, in universities, in K to 12. It's everywhere. And if Canadians don't wake up, it's not only the Jews that will be the targets, because we're things that start with Jews will never end with Jews, and we're going to see a Canadian society that is much less attractive, much less healthy for all Canadians, not only Jews.
Any thoughts on why we seem to see very tepid responses from many of our politicians who should speak out strongly against this, not only speak, but actually take some concrete action to bring about change? When we see these different anti-Semitic events, they seem kind of slow to speak, or again, they tend to blame Israel rather than dealing with Hamas, that sort of thing. I mean, I've heard some people say, well, maybe it's because of votes, maybe there's a bigger voter percentage, people who would support that kind of a response rather than a pro-Israel response?
So politicians have not been vocal enough at all levels. They have not done enough at all levels. And if I were to summarize, at least in terms of anti-Semitism in Canada, what we've been seeing in our streets and the demonstrations in front of synagogues and Jewish community schools and the like is just apply the laws that are in the books. There are holes to plug in terms of legislation, and we have policies to correct that. But there are laws that should be applied. If tomorrow or if now I stop the interview and go in the middle of the street here and block traffic, I will be fined or I will be stopped by police. But if I were to walk with a couple of people with a Palestinian flag, then now suddenly it's okay. This blockage of traffic, that those illegal demonstrations happening in places where there's no Israeli institutions, in walking, intimidating people in Jewish neighborhoods, that is not okay. And the police has the tools, and they just have to use the tools that is in their toolbox.
Yeah, so the question is, why are they not using those tools? So, go ahead.
Sorry, if we speak to police and say, well, we don't always, the politicians don't always have our backs. And then on the other hand, when we talk to the politicians, they say, well, the police has all the tools in the toolbox, they just have to apply it. So that that ping pong saying, oh no, it's this person or that buck passing has to stop, because we're talking about lives here. And we saw in the US recently that it can actually lead to real violence and death. We saw it in Boulder, Colorado, and in Washington, D.C. And if we think that Canada is immune to this, we are dead wrong.
People need to watch the Bonhoeffer movie. You know, honestly, I watched it and I thought, oh, Lord. You know, and we do need people like that who will have a backbone and, I guess, be willing to make a sacrifice to stand up. So, I mean, it's kind of I think you need to see change from the grassroots up as well as from the top down. Are there some political leaders, some business leaders who are going to take a stand and say, no, I'm going to stand up for freedom, for what's right, for justice, even if it means, you know, some people might not choose to be friends with me anymore. And that's okay. Frankly, I don't want friends who are going to be hateful toward Jewish people or any other people group.
But it's not only leaders, Paul. Not only people in positions of authority. I think it's all Canadians. We collectively can make Canada better for everybody. So it's not, we can't wait for politicians or for a politician or a police chief or a union leader or a business person to take the lead. It's on all of us to make sure that this stops. And we have all of us to speak up when we see anti-Semitism, because it's on all of us. We can't delegate that anymore. The problem is too deep.
No, well said. I appreciate that. I mean, I think, you know, as people are watching this, you know, we have to take our responsibility and do our part. And part of that, you know, yes, we want our government leaders to do something, but then that means we actually need to take the time to talk to our government leaders and communicate with them, with our school boards. You know, sit down, have a coffee with them, say, this is why I'm concerned. I'm seeing this happening in our schools. It needs to stop. I'm running out of time here. Thank you so much for being with us here, Richard. Again, Richard Marceau with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CIJA.ca is their website. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, WizeUp.ca.